First, proceed to the Cadian outpost and establish their fate. You must then infiltrate the refinery and complete demolition's deployment. Trigger detonation only when the main swarm has entered the plaza zone. Captain Akaran...
Hey guys, so shit's gone off the rails recently, and a bunch of people on the left are accusing a bunch of people on the right for cancel culture, for people accurately judging far leftists celebrating cold-blooded murder as disgusting and firing them. So, it's not an issue of free speech. At least it's like an issue of three different things. So, let's talk about it. So, it's not just free speech. It's the intersection of property rights, free speech, and government subsidy. So, recently, as backlash for lying about Charlie Kirk's killer, i.e. saying woman, dick sucker, and furry in a relationship with a pre-op female-to-male trans was MAGA, for saying that, Jimmy Kimmel got fired off of his show. Like, that incorrect statement alone is worth firing Jimmy Kimmel, especially without an apology, which he hasn't yet given and probably won't give, because it's a lie. And it probably opened them up in terms of liability as a publisher, and by them I mean ABC, Disney ABC, as a publisher, to lawsuits and libel from Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk. And that's in the current day event of Trump winning several big lawsuits, one of them like 15-16 million, against people for libel. So within that, that atmosphere, you've got Kimmel doing this, opening them up to tremendous liability for a libel lawsuit or some sort of civil suit from Kirk. Mrs. Kirk has also recently said she's going to do a $40 million lawsuit against, I think it was ABC. Probably for slander, probably because ABC probably called Charlie Kirk a fascist or Trump a fascist. And if you call Trump a fascist, by extension of that, Charlie Kirk's a fascist because Charlie Kirk's campaigning for Trump. He's one of the most influential podcasters, etc., for Trump. So by extension, he's a fascist. The assassin had extra bullets, which he didn't fire at Kirk, which were engraved. Engraved on one of them was fascist. That's like a 1-to-1. That's a serious problem if, for example, you're a media company that deals mainly in fact-based news, and you've already lost a huge lawsuit against Trump. You're probably on your way to losing one against Erica Kirk. And then you have this dipshit Kimmel fucking doing this shit. Like, I don't know about that. In addition to that, you have Kimmel losing them tons and tons of money. Like, he wasn't that popular, and he was in fact losing them money, he wasn't making them money. But not just losing their money because he wasn't that popular and the cost of his show was higher than what he was bringing in. The liability of that lawsuit by lying, like, it wasn't even a joke. Like, if it was like a comedian, it was just a rough joke and he was joking. Even if it was like an unfunny joke that just landed poorly, like, it could maybe be, slotted into like a debate about free speech, saying, okay, it's an off-color joke, shouldn't really have to apologize to it for it, even though it was like pretty bad taste, that sort of deal. No, it was just kind of an incorrect statement, just kind of a lie. That lie, bad. But, that's what leftists have been doing for a long time. And not just, lying directly in news and media or presenting the news and media with such a horrible, obvious far left slant, especially in Australia and shit like that. But they've also been doing this thing of creating and pushing what I call pseudo news. They basically create a media entertainment show, usually about, pop culture, and has interviews of celebrities and all that sort of thing, usually headed by a comedian. And then they present that show as factual news. Like, Australia's version of this was The Project. The Project recently got cancelled. It was basically multiple comedians talking about stories and current events, usually followed by, their opinion and their moralizing. This was usually presented by like a former news presenter amongst the comedians, or just this other dipshit journalist called Waleed, like whose eyes were like sort of magnetically repelled each other, and he went sort of cross. But I'm not gonna give him too much shit. Like, he was just some Muslim goofball. In his family lineage, there's probably a couple of generations of cousin marriage. I'm not going to be too harsh on Waleed, right? He's doing the best with what he can, and what he can is, what he can do is serve a corrupt Australian government and fucking, basically do their propaganda bidding. Hey, look, made him rich. I'm not rich. So, maybe I'm just a hater, right? Anyway. It's not journalism, is the point. It's not news either. But it tricks these low IQ, low information people that, fall into the appeal to celebrity, appeal to authority fallacy with their thinking. It kind of tricks them into believing it is news, and then they get popular support from all these low information people. It's very politically cynical. Let's put it that way. It's very politically cynical. Now, is that even a problem? Well, yes, but it wouldn't be if, they covered the base like someone like Crowder. Stephen Crowder's like a comedian, but he often mixes in his politics into his comedy, which can include going off on, political rants, which is, that's fine. But he also covers his base saying repeatedly this is a comedy show and that you should check all these sources for yourself. When he presents things as facts, he usually covers it with that. He usually says, okay, check these sources for yourself. And also it actually has jokes in it, and the jokes are actually funny. It's not just, a straight up political diatribe about how the right are bad and they're Nazis and all that sort of, false shit. It's not just, an open, naked Trump insult, which appeals to, retarded TDS people that can't see, Biden was infinitely worse. They'll call Trump a pedophile who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein with absolutely zero proof. But they, at the same time, will completely ignore the Hunter Biden, Ashley Biden diary, which was proven true, which had Ashley Biden showering with her dad. Suspect shit like that, right? Shit like that, they'll just completely ignore, but then they'll call Trump a pedophile without any proof whatsoever. They're fucked in the head. And in between that, you've also got, the Stephen Colbert thing where he had, in the middle of COVID mandates, which were incredibly unpopular, it saw multi-million person marches across several cities in Australia. For example, you have Colbert doing a dancing needle Pee Wee Herman advertisement for, Big Pharma on his, late night comedy show. These people are fucking scum. They're complete fucking soulless cocksucker sellouts. They're the worst people. Not even funny. politically, partisan to the umpteenth degree, usually just presenting political narrative, usually which is correct. Not just incorrect, but factually incorrect. But anyway, back to Kimmel. It's just like a little bit more complicated than that. It's not free speech. It was a business. The business is owned by people. People have a duty to other people that invest in their business as well. That is a direct intersection between, property rights and free speech. Between two constitutional rights, right? Kimmel's not entitled to his show. He's not entitled to ABC Disney, which has shareholders, sponsoring his show at a loss, right? He's not entitled to that, okay? It's an entertainment show, it's not a news show. Like, you shouldn't have government-sponsored news anyway, because the government's corrupt as fuck, and that'll just usually end up being state propaganda. It usually will not go against said government, which is subsidizing it, if you know what I mean. Like, so you got the right to free speech and the right to own property. We've seen historically what happens when both of these rights are transgressed upon in different ways, right? In our moment in history now, it should be obvious that we need both of these rights, or shit becomes really violent, terrible, tyrannical chaos, right? Without free speech, you get either the Soviet Union, where the Soviets throw you into gulags for criticising the government, or ironically now in the UK, where you go to jail for like social media posts or words, and those words can be like, saying you enjoy bacon, or, flying your own country's flag, something like that. Like, not threats or calls to violence, mind you. Like, it's just typically criticism of the state or its policies or its extremely unpopular, sacred cause taboos that it absolutely despises, getting transgressed upon. Yeah, like, that's just the case. Like, it very quickly, slippery slopes. Like, in the UK, in the UK's case, under, like, fucking retard queer Starmer, you literally have people being arrested for sayings about, like, pork that offend Muslims. Like, like, that's ridiculous. And the fact that you can be, like, arrested and put in jail because, flying your own flag is like white supremacy something or other, like some retarded, ill-defined left-wing nonsense. So, like, it's just obvious you just need free speech, right? You need free speech written into the Constitution. You need it as a constitutional right. You need it well understood as a constitutional right, and you should be very, very fucking careful with hate speech. Especially hate speech that transgresses upon free speech. Because, as you can see, it just goes politically partisan one way, all the way, and then it turns authoritarian very quickly when that, corrupt, politically partisan power gets in charge. In this instance, in the UK, and in the Soviet Union, it's the far left. They put people into jail for criticising their bullshit causes. Now, property rights is another one that you really don't want transgressed upon. Especially when it comes to government and government institutions and government-backed or subsidised or owned businesses or franchises. What happens is, typically, which has happened in China with corrupt versions of it, it's happened in North Korea with corrupt versions of it, and it's happened in the Soviet Union with corrupt versions of it. You usually get these sort of corrupt, government-backed parallel economies, and they're usually backed unethically by tax money. So they don't have to worry about competing in the free market or providing a quality service or whatever. They usually run at low cost, usually either through taxpayer funding or slave labor in China's case. China's case, where you can just literally use free labor to run it. The same was in the Soviet Union, free labor to run those shit, free labor to run gold mines, all that sort of thing. So you have government unethically setting up these parallel economies which compete in free market, which directly challenges property rights. This can become an absolutely fucking huge problem, particularly when it involves banks, debanking, that sort of thing. It devolves into something like China's social credit score or something like that, where the parallel economies, the parallel government-backed economies, completely annihilate the free market equivalents of these economies, meaning you have to play into these systems, right? You have to play into them in order to get food and things like that when it's like a supermarket or whatever. It's at this point that if you're an enemy of the government and it's government-backed, parallel economies, which is usually providing the food, it's at this point the government can just deny you access to them, say through China's social credit score or whatever.
If you know what is good for you.
Like, it's not just like, there's multiple ways that, like, it can play out, right? Like, it's annoying when it's the internet. When it's the news, you only have state propaganda instead of media, entertainment, or true journalism. And no accountability at that point for, like, false reporting. When it's the court system, justice just completely breaks down and you have criminals released on, no bail. When it's supermarkets and it's down to food, the people just starve to death, which is what you see in communism a bunch of times. It gets worse, of course, if you've got no property rights and everything belongs to the vague concept of the people, and the people are distributed to by the government. Then at that point they can literally just seize your property and you'll starve to death, which is what happened in the Holodomor, basically. So when businesses receive significant government help, they should then become politically impartial. Governments themselves should remain relatively bipartisan. They shouldn't go all the way in on politically partisan issues unless the politically partisan issues have like 70% support or something like that. Unless it's just like a minority of weirdos backing, like terrible ideas. Say like bail reform or whatever. If it's like a minority of, retarded leftists backing like a, terrible idea of bail reform that releases criminals out onto the streets, then, you can probably reform it a bit, right? But it gets bad if it's extremely partisan and it's extremely unpopular. Like with Keir Starmer and Albanese recently recognising a Palestinian state. From the polling that I've seen, that is a minority position. The majority of people either don't want to be involved in a decision like that, so that would be your, okay, remain completely silent on the issue, let's see how it plays out, which is the safe choice. Or they're directly opposed to it because they see that Hamas is literally a terrorist organization and it literally started the war in Gaza at the moment. It's literally trying to kill its own people. Recently, like almost immediately after Albanese backed, two-state solution in Gaza politically, Hamas publicly executed like 3 people accused of being Israeli spies and providing information to Israel. If you know anything about the history of, Hamas and Palestinian terrorists in Israeli prisons, from Hassan Masab Youssef and like other people like that, if you've read their biographies or whatever, you'll know that most of the people they kill in prisons are out of paranoia rather than them actually being Israeli spies. They usually don't correctly catch Israeli spies in prisons. So there's a pretty good chance that these 3 people accused of being Israeli spies were actually completely fucking innocent Palestinians. Which, is to be expected. Muslims are incredibly low IQ from intergenerational inbreeding and, fucking violent, terrible ideologies that, reward a lack of critical thinking, that sort of deal. Yeah, that's just the case of things. But anyway, you had the Australian Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, directly recognising Palestine as a state and saying Israel needs to have some sort of 2-state solution there. Completely fucking retarded take. Completely just, rewarding terrorism and terroristic behaviour. It's like the dumbest fucking political position you can take. It wasn't politically popular in Australia. It's like a far left-wing sacred position to take. It runs off a parallel economy, a parallel propaganda media economy there, because it uses Hamas's reporting to justify its genocide claims. Hamas just claims like 60,000 people have been killed or whatever, but it doesn't even distinguish between civilians and Hamas combatants in its, Gaza Health Ministry totals. So it's just complete bullshit. It's just a fucking objectively bad decision just made by, terrible partisan left-wing hacks in government. It didn't enjoy popular support, and we're gonna fucking suffer because of it. Put it that way. It's not politically impartial. Now, all of that being said, when you do own your own business, and your business doesn't enjoy massive tax breaks or political subsidy by government, you can do whatever you want with it. It is your property. Like, within the laws of the market. Can you kick out a violent trainee employee out for, violent comments or because you just don't like them or their attitude? Certainly, it's your business. Of course you can kick that violent trainee out. Can you decide to not serve Muslims because you don't like Islamic institutions of child marriage within Islamic culture? Certainly, it's your business, but look, there are like 2 billion potential customers in the Muslim community, so you might lose some capital if you do that. And I guess that applies to voters if you like the UK or Australian government, like some far-left cunt communist government. But, okay, your business is your property. That being said, this balances out with civil law. Can a gay go to an openly Christian baker and demand him to bake him a cock cake against the Christian baker's religion and morality? Maybe. Why is the gay guy going to a Christian baker? Why isn't the gay guy going to a gay baker? Are the gay bakers of lower quality than the Christian baker? Can you not trust the cream or the chocolate from the gay baker because there may be bodily fluids in it? Like, it balances with civil law, right? At this point, you can have one individual suing the other and the government will act as like an impartial arbitrator, like a third party. But as you can see, within these cases, it's usually safer to err on the side of property rights in like these cases for individual owned businesses. Like, the openly Christian baker should be, fine to just say, no, I don't want to bake you a custom cock cake, right? Like, that's just like a reasonable issue. It's not oppressing the individual to deny them like a custom service of baking them a cock cake. But, like, when cunt communist activist judges, typically get involved with this sort of shit, they very quickly fuck it up. And I think deliberately so, but they also begin to quickly, just make a absolute constitutional mess of the precedent and law here. Like, their goal seems to be to dissolve both property rights and free speech rights in an inconsistent way. Like, for example, if you're in the UK and you went to like a Muslim store and you ordered like a bacon and egg roll or a bacon something, rather than just having the Muslim, deny you service, you would probably, at this point get a year or two in prison for hate something or other, rather than just, have the business, trespass you if you're making a scene and then ban you from service. Like, that's objectively transgressed on several civil liberties there, right? It's transgressed on free speech with hate speech laws, and it's transgressed on property rights and free expression. It's like a complete mess, right? And it's usually left-wing activist judges which have, picked their pet cause here and fucked that up. When, like, obviously just left alone, both people can act on their own there. It's like this fragile victim mentality of Muslims that they have their ultimate sacred taboo, which is their religion, and it can't be insulted in any way, and you can't even eat pork in their presence and all that sort of thing, and they're superior to you, so they get to enforce it on you, especially in like a supposedly tolerant liberal Christian country like the UK. Like, it's just a complete fucking mess, when like the situation should be both people can just act on their own there. The individual has a right to demand the bacon or pork or whatever, according to their free speech, to offend the Muslim. He doesn't have to like it, because he's Islamic. Yeah, but like, the person that does that may, not like Islamic people because of the institution of pedophilic child marriage, which he disagrees with. The Muslim business owner who owns the store and is entitled to the property rights of the store, and owns the land the store is on, and has the right to ban him from like his halal store for offending him with, with the truth. Like, nowhere there does the government need to step in. The Muslim can ban him from his property. The dude has a right to offend the Muslim. Nowhere there does the government need to step in. Like, unless, of course, the customer's black and refuses to leave after the Muslim banned him, and then starts a fight like at a Waffle House, then the government needs to step in. Or the government might also need to step in if, the Muslim store owner tries to stab or behead the customer because, there was a rumour the customer defaced the Quran or insulted their prophet or something like that. Then the government might need to step in. Or if, like, the Muslim store owner is, grooming underage British girls in the back and threatening to cut off their toes if they run away, then, the government also needs to step in. Hey, government, why didn't you step in for the last one for 20 years? All right. Anyway... Yeah, anyway, back to Kimmel. You're entitled to free speech. I don't think you're entitled to lie with your free speech. That seems to be like, the devil's interpretation of free speech. Oh, free speech includes the freedom to lie if you want to. I wouldn't argue it does. Knowingly lie. Like, sure, you can be incorrect. But at a certain point, if you're lying or not. And I would argue free speech doesn't afford you protection if you are deliberately lying or deliberately trying to sow chaos with lies and that sort of shit. If you're trying to sow chaos with the truth, on the other hand, I would argue free speech does protect you. But it's like just this interpretation of evil. Like, okay, you've got the freedom to do it. Yes. Do you have the freedom to lie? Well, that wasn't even taken into account, because the laws were kind of written under the assumption that most people are good and won't lie. If you know what I mean? It's not written under the assumption, okay, people are going to deceive one another and be bad actors in society. It wasn't really Like, no, actually. In fact, we've actually got laws against fraud and that sort of thing. Like, you shouldn't lie and you shouldn't bear false witness. Like, that's in the Bible. And that's in Christian ethics. And Christian common law was based on Christian ethics. Like, can you lie? Sure, you can lie. You've got the freedom of lie. You've got free will. Should the law protect your free speech when you're deliberately lying, potentially putting people at risk through stochastic terrorism or committing fraud? No. No, the law shouldn't protect you then. Like, that's why you have libel laws, but within the libel laws, you have to know whether or not you're lying or not. Like, libel laws will offer you some protection if you are unknowingly lying, right? If you're just incorrect, they will offer you some protection, especially in civil cases and that sort of thing. If you knowingly lie, and that lie results in damages, then the other person's entitled to, you know, those damages. Like, I don't know what to say. That's not an issue of free speech. Like, I don't get where the left is coming from with this claim that it's an attack on free speech to get rid of Jimmy, who's already costing money, who knowingly lied. The lies may result in real-world damages of of actual terrorism through his stochastic terrorism. It will result in real-world damages to ABC and Disney if they are seen to not punish him for, you know, lying and opening them up to liability. The liability in that case is very serious too. They've already lost several major lawsuits, and they have another serious lawsuit on their hands with, you know, Erica Kirk, who has legitimate damages. Her husband is dead because of these lies. Like, oh, okay. But you still think it's like a free speech issue? Like, why is it always the left that's on these sides, like, of these, like, pretty much satanic issues? Like, it wouldn't be a good Christian person that would be, you know, advocating for the freedom to lie with their free speech, right? It wouldn't be a good Christian person advocating for that. It would be an evil cunt, like, influenced by Satan, that would be advocating for that. It would usually be because they're trying to commit fraud in one way or another by advocating for that. Why are we, like, pretending otherwise with that? It's, like, not a free speech issue. It's like a cunt issue.
Straven here. Our ambush was highly effective.
Tenant bioscience down 90% and falling. Swarm annihilation confirmed. Excellent work. Move to extract. Extraction complete. Returning to orbit.